Welcome to Pro Practice, your guide to piano mastery. I'm Josh Wright, and today's tutorial will be going over the Mazurka in F sharp minor, Opus 59 No. 3. This is the final Mazurka in the Opus 59 set, composed and published in 1845. In the last 2 months, we've covered number 1 and number 2 from this set, along with another Mazurka that I squeezed in there, Opus 17 No. 4. And I'm happy to be finishing this set today. I was fortunate enough to perform this at the National Chopin Competition back in 2015, an experience I hold very dear and which I enjoyed so much and which really challenged me to play these pieces to an even higher level than I was used to before. Preparing for competitions will do that to you. This is a live performance that I'm about to share with you from that competition, so it's not perfect, but I hope you enjoy it or at least find things that you may want to do differently than me. Without further ado, here's the recording, and after that we will get into the analysis, technical exercises, musical ideas, voicing suggestions, pedal suggestions, and much more. Here's the recording. All right, as I said before, I hope you either enjoyed that or found things you would want to do differently. I remember listening a lot to the recordings of Marta Argerich, Vladimir Horowitz, and many others. There's amazing recordings from all the Chopin competition archives in Poland, and also the National Chopin Competition. A lot of the competitors that I competed against played mazurkas incredibly beautifully. So make sure you spend time listening and gathering ideas, and that will inform you of potential things that you might do in your own performance. a story that I've told many times before about my amazing teacher, Logan Skelton, when I was studying at the University of Michigan. He said, I was studying Prokofiev's Seventh Sonata, and I was obsessed with the Richter recording. And I sounded a lot like Richter with my choices that I made with interpretation, where I would lead with lines, where I would choose to take time, because I was a copycat of him. And then one day I turned off the recordings and I said, okay, I need to develop my own ideas. And he said, I came back to it a few months later, and I said, I'm sure I still sound just like that, like I did before. And he said I had changed, just by degrees. I had changed. I had made it my own. So that's why I wanted to just take a moment to talk about recordings. It was funny. That story was brought on by me bringing him these mazurkas. And the first time I played them for him, he's like, these are pretty good, but you're lacking some of the magic that you often have in your Chopin playing. Go home and rethink these things. And he gave me some suggestions. But the next week he came back and he said, what in the world did you do in this last week? These are some of the best mazurkas I've heard. And I said, oh, I just listened to the Martha Argerich recordings and I kind of copied what she did. He's like, keep doing that. He's like, but over time, and then he told me that story. He said, over time, they will become your own. So just a little word about recordings before we get started. I highly recommend listening to them. The worst advice I ever got was from a judge saying you should never listen to recordings because you won't develop your own voice. I agree with her to the extent that you don't want to be a copycat and do everything a recording does. You want to make it your own. But that's the worst advice because you can get so much inspiration from listening to great pianists, far superior than I ever was. And listening to those amazing pianists elevated my conception of the piece. Really quickly, I always like to try to give an outline of the piece, kind of an overlay of the form. You can think of this in a large ABA form, but again, if I was sitting on a doctoral exam, I don't think I would say that because these mazurkas are a little strange. Chopin does juxtapose a few little random things that doesn't make it an exact ternary form, but overall, you can think of the first theme. You can actually, let's keep going. So this large A section, we'll call it, is in a rounded binary form. So that's the first part. This is the second part. And then the rounding back to the original idea. All right, so that's your A section, and that goes all the way until we transition into the B section. Over in bar 43, and this is that was bar 44. Now we're in 45. So very contrasting by nature. By the way, this mazurka is in the style of an oberek. Hopefully, I'm saying that correctly. A much faster Polish dance than the mazurka, traditional mazurka. This middle section is much more subdued. So we're going to create contrast with those sections. We see this funny little kind of like whirling dervish type feeling in bar 71. And Chopin, again, he's playing with us. And then all of a sudden, he toys with us. So he has these long, languishing chromatic lines followed by this much quicker dance. And then he goes back to this. Okay? And then we see this chromatic transition over in bar 97. Return of the A in bar 105. Okay? And then again, we see in bar 134 kind of this just hanging out, and then we go back to that fun little dance in the oberek style as well. So we see two of those intense dance styles, one of them in F sharp minor, and these in F sharp major. So he's using, like we had talked in the Opus 17 number 4, how that one is in A minor, and then he uses A major. So he uses the parallel major. Here he's doing the same thing. And then we see a little codetta, I would call it, at the end. Okay, and it ends fairly abruptly. He just writes quarter, quarter, quarter rest. I'm going to drag that second to last beat out a little bit longer because I don't want it to be too abrupt. But he doesn't want you to hold it for a long time. He is very clear with that. It's just a quarter note followed by a quarter rest. Of course, we can kind of breathe and stretch, but he doesn't write. He does write sostenuto, so you can expand there. So I don't think that needs to be in any type of hurry, but I also don't think that this is it's very regal, long drawn-out ending. And some people like to end it, much more subdued. So that's up to you. That's a choice that you can make. That gives you a general overlay of the piece. Now let's dive into, first of all, I just wanted to talk a bit about pedaling, because when I first picked this piece up, I was a little confused about the pedaling, because Chopin writes the ends of slurs coming off in places that don't coincide with where you release the pedal, or it is where you release the pedal, but we don't necessarily want to release that hand. Let me show you what I mean. So he writes a slur, and then he writes. So I don't think that sounds good to come off there with the hands and leave the pedal down, and then I think it sounds too pedaled. So you might say, okay, let's dry it out a little bit with the pedal. Let's be a little bit more sparing with that. Well, if you do that and you follow the slurs exactly, that's going to get very annoying very quickly. Occasionally you can do one or two of those for effect, but this is, I think, way too dry. So what I came to after I listened to a lot of recordings, I believe the Argerich and Horowitz recordings do this. I haven't listened to them for a little while, but pedal, I come off on the second beats, pedal off, and I connect the right hand. So I come off on the second beat, and then I go back down with the pedal, and then I change. Back down with the pedal, change, off, pedal, change, off, pedal, change, off, pedal, change, off, pedal, change, 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 change. Keep that in one pedal, and then change, change. Of course, you can look at the pedal cam, but I do like to dictate this a little bit. First of all, for the visually impaired who are watching this, I know some blind pianists actually watch this series. And second of all, just to reinforce how strange it kind of is, because that emphasis of the second beat by taking time there and the third kind of falling into it, that is so typical of a mazurka, to emphasize the offbeats. So the other thing that I want to immediately start talking about is rubato. You're noticing that I'm not playing this straight, so if you didn't notice that, there's some problems, because this is what it would be straight. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. We kind of want to do that. Horowitz took a little time there. I even notated his name there with a little squiggle, meaning take time. I loved that. And then it sweetens up. Piano. And then the second part of the rounded binary. So we see A, A7, and then another prevailing thing that he does throughout the entire piece is so much chromaticism, especially in this left hand. You're gonna... And that is such a beautiful mechanism or feature that you can highlight as you play. So you can maybe take a little time so it doesn't sound like, oh, going A natural to A sharp, that's so ordinary. No, it's not. And Chopin is a genius when it comes to chromaticism. Just look at this piece. The Etude in F major, Opus 25, number 3. He modulates from F major to B major, so the entire circle of fifths, and then he works his way back in a piece that only lasts 4 pages or 2 or 3 minutes. It's very short. And this is just, again, Chopin. I don't think Chopin's showing off with this piece intentionally. I think this is very serious and also very cute and unexpected. But it is a masterclass in chromatic genius, how he just winds his way through all these keys. This is one of the reasons I have so much respect for Chopin, is how he can use chromaticism throughout to create unbelievably beautiful, mysterious, and jarring effects, and how he ties it so beautifully when he cadences. He ties it all together so beautiful when he has a cadence, the end of a phrase. So let's keep going with this. So we've talked about pedal, we've talked a little bit about rubato. Now let's talk about some shape on this first initial 8 bars.